Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature video number 135, the new Dream Book, a complete fortune-telling system. Now, as always, links in the description to my edition of this work first, second and third links to WordPress and Blogspot, my literary blogs on two different platforms, depending on which one you're used to more and you prefer using. I know some people don't like the Google services as much. They do the boycott thing. If you're watching this on BitChute, there's a pretty good chance you're part of that group, by the way. This particular work, it's a little over 100 pages, so relatively complete. Most of it dwells on dream interpretation. That's about 75 pages of its overall content. It's quite good. As a system, it's more fleshed out than some of the dream interpretation books, and I believe it shares a lot of overlap with the 1860s era New Fortune Teller. That one, I believe, borrows heavily from this, but the most important part of this work, from a literary history tradition, from that background, may be the extremely short, roughly 2 pages of chart-based fortune-telling. That is, that it appears to be the first work that has a grid-like system comparable to the much more fleshed-out latter-day Napoleon's Oraculum or some of these other fortune-telling grids. Of course, the philosophical Merlin deviates it further. This has a small section called Chartology, and insofar as that is included, it appears to be the earliest work that has such a system. Now, in this one, with Napoleon's Oraculum, well, with the most recent version, you're supposed to take basically slips of paper with the numbers and letters and sort of mix them up and then choose them at random. Or you can use a random number generator, actually, within the same oracle tradition. Before that, with Napoleon's Oraculum, you're supposed to sort of absent-mindedly write lines in the sand 4 times and then 4 times. And if you know math, if you're good at math and remembering what you're doing, you could easily screw with the oracle. So it's not a true random situation. People at the time, of course, would ascribe it to superstition, maybe not realize that. They weren't as good at math back then. Then this version, you literally would just have the grid. And apparently you would just you would place the grid randomly on the paper and then have the person poke holes through it in order to tell the fortune for 6 different questions, all of which, by the way, relate to love. Later on, with the latter-day oracles, it can also deal with wealth, work, health. Will you be successful for the immediate future? Will you be successful in life as a whole? It's much, much larger. Even the more simplified version from the late 1800s is larger than this particular chart oracle. But that's basically what it is. You could call it the proto-oracle from which that particular tradition stems. And the dream interpretation tradition of these fortune tellers ties right into it. And it also contains a section on moles. It's got the most large and elaborate section of any of the fortune-telling works I've encountered on that particular subject. And this comes from the very early 1800s. So this is closer to the Norwood Gypsy era than even the Napoleon's Oraculum era. Overall, the dream interpretation section is standard but fleshed out. The mole prognostication is expansive. And then the chart system is quite simplified. It also has a fairly short section dealing with cards. It's got several different types of methods by which you can tell fortunes by drawing a certain number of cards, card throwing, picking at random, and so forth. It's an interesting system. It's a little more confusing than some of the others, where you would simply ask a question and then draw a card or a couple of cards. This one's a little more in-depth. It has some basic mathematics involved with it. I guess in an effort to prevent the person from gaming the actual fortune-telling system. Importantly, as I described in my last occult video, sometimes inversion is used within the dream interpretations, and they tend to revolve around several things: your job and wealth, your health, and then this sort of marital or courtship style life, like your relationships. Also, because it's pre-Victorian, the willingness to talk about the activities of Venus, the opening of hymen, and things of that nature, they're quite explicit. They're actually risque compared to a Victorian work of occultism. Like, you look at the phallism works from the Victorian era, things are treated with very academic vigor. Here it's more on the folk magic side. It's like, oh, you're going to have like 3 husbands. You're going to lose your virginity to your mistress before you get married. And it's considered maybe not something that's good, but it was tolerated. It wasn't something that was spurned so much at the time. It's an interesting, therefore, period piece in the wake of the Enlightenment. For almost a century, that sort of thing prior to the fire and brimstone stuff was fairly common. the concept of full monogamy, save yourself till marriage, hadn't fully developed yet in many parts of the world. It was actually a totally different animal. It's rather interesting. So it's a very good work. This one comes highly recommended. If you're interested in fortune-telling folk magic from these sort of Western European and American traditions, this would be invaluable. It'd be one of the best ones. It would definitely be up there with the Norwood Gypsies' work or Napoleon's Oraculum. Much better than many of them. And I've still got 3 other fortune-telling works in these traditions to edit that I've identified. Actually, the total number, I think, is up to 11 as far as the number of distinct works along these same intertwined traditions. And there's a 12th work at least that I can't seem to obtain, but that I know exists that I'm still sporadically attempting to dig for. So again, link in the description to my edition of this work. Again, it's been corrected for some grammar issues. A few word usages were arcane and had to be switched. Mostly, though, it's fairly easy. The condition of the original was tolerably good. And second and third links to my book blogs. If you're interested in fortune telling, there's a whole section specifically on that, sort of the psychic stuff. That's about all. Peace out.